Hello and welcome to another video brought by Louis Art. My name is Emmanuel Okafo and I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. In this video, my goal by the end of it is to make sure you guys leave this video understanding how I created this spaghetti scene inside Blender. And so while we're learning how to create the spaghetti scene, you'll also be picking a lot of cool techniques and cool knowledge and information inside Blender. Some of that include understanding the soft body in Blender because we're using it in some instance to get more good result. We'll also be understanding the compositor in Blender to enhance our image. Also, if you've never played with if you've never created your own custom shader, this video is for you because we'll be creating our own custom shader to get the look we want. So if you're down for that, let's get started. Here we have an empty scene and we'll basically be creating everything from scratch. I have my screencast key here so you can follow along with my mouse movement and also my keyboard shortcuts in case I forget and just keep using my own shortcuts. Okay, so let's first start by creating the plates or bowl that I'll be using for the spaghetti. So I'm just gonna add a simple UV sphere, jump into edit mode and switch to face and wireframe. I will box select half of it or probably a bit more than half and delete that and we have a bowl. Okay, so I'll place it there and then we can add a solidifier modifier just to give it some thickness, and to kind of smooth everything out we'll go and add the subdivision modifier. So we can use the object context menu to apply the shade smooth. You can still access that here, shade smooth. Okay, so we have a plate, so let's go ahead and name it. We'll call this a bowl. So now in this step we'll be creating the spaghetti. I've divided the spaghetti into two different groups of spaghetti we'll be creating. The first one is something I'm calling the volume spaghetti. Basically this is just instance mesh that is going to be filling up the bowl with spaghetti, and the second group are the simulated spaghetti, which will be at the surface, which you'll be seeing more of, and this needs to be simulated so it looks very natural. So let's go ahead and create that. So to do that I'm going to duplicate this bowl and go ahead now and call this instance generator. Okay, and we can hide the bowl for a little while. For the instant generation, we want to basically remove all the unnecessary modifiers which we added for the bowl. So I'll be deleting the solidifier modifier. I will be leaving the subdivision for now. Okay, so selecting your mesh, you want to go into your edit mode and we'll switch to vertex select. If you hold on Alt and click, you can select this loop and we just extrude it by hitting E, and we'll just extrude and scale. Basically what we are trying to create now is a rough shape of how we want the spaghetti to look. Okay, so once you have it like this and you choose to kind of modify it some more, the basic shape, you can select it and go into sculpt mode, and we can just adjust this to make it look how we want it to look. I will go ahead and in the apply, I want to apply the rotation and scale. The reason for this is when you modify an object, you scale it, you rotate it, and you want to apply simulation, it's always important you apply your rotation and scale. This reduces the error that might come up if you don't do this. We'll be using the old particle system, we'll not be using geometry node for this, but geometry node can definitely do this. It's basically generating particles in the volume of the object. Okay, so I'll click on add new. For the frame start and end frame, I will set both of them to 1. Okay, so we can see all the particles now. I will click on the source and switch it from emit from faces to volume. So it's going to be from the volume. Next, for the distribution, I'm going to switch it from jitter to grid. There's no real reason for this. I just found that the grid makes everything look neater and I could just easily keep track of what I'm doing, so I'm switching it to grid. Okay, you can always increase the amount by playing with the resolution. So the most important next step is adding the instant object. So let's create those instance objects. For that, we'll be using curve to kind of generate the spaghetti. Handle type automatic. I just prefer working with the automatic handle type. And now you can just go ahead and have fun with this stage. You create your own cool shape. So once you're done, we want to go into the curve settings, geometry, depth. You can increase the depth. The next thing we want to click on is fill cap, so we can fill up this. We don't want it to be open, we want it closed. Reduce the amount of geometry. So I'll also reduce this one for the radius, and this is what we are left with. Once we have done that, we can go to object, convert mesh. Right now, if I use L to select island, we can see that the caps are not attached to the mesh. So we want to merge them. If you click on M for merge, so you want to click on by distance. So it's going to delete all unnecessary faces and merge them together. So now if we select this island, we can see it's all connected. Okay, so we'll repeat what we did earlier, P by loose part, and we have the spaghetti object. So let's go to object, set origin to geometry, apply rotation and scale like I showed you earlier. And now you can just basically come here and rename everything. So we'll call this noodles. Select all these noodles and move them into a new collection. This is just to keep the scene very clean. So I'll call this noodles. Now we have our instance object and we have our emitter already set up. So let's combine everything. So in the particles, I would go to render. Instead of rendering a halo object, we want to render a collection. And that collection is going to be our noodles. So it's working now, but we cannot see it because the size are small. I don't want to see the emitter object, so I will uncheck show emitter both in the viewport and the render, and this is what we see. It's quite uniform and a bit messy. We'll be fixing all of this in a bit. Okay, so you can just play with the scale, try to make it match relative to the plate which you're going for, and of course your reference. Right now everything looks very even, so we need a way to break it off, so we'll be using the rotation. So the next step is to convert all of this into mesh. So that's why it was important that we kind of optimize everything. So we'll click on make instant real, and it kind of makes everything to mesh. I will move this temporarily to a new collection. I will still move all the objects into the noodles collection, but this is just temporarily, like I said. And that is because I need to do some cleanup here. Blender has some issues with particle system, especially the old one, not geometry nodes. It connects the objects, and once you apply it, it kind of messes everything up. So I will select this and clear the user. So this is one of it. Just remove all the users information here, and also I will grab the emitter and I can possibly just delete it. Better still, I'll leave it, but I will delete the particle system. Here in this group where we have the newly created noodles, we can select them and just join them into one object, and we'll apply the rotation and scale. So one obvious thing that you can see now, it is not conformed to the plate, so we need to fix that. So it's quite easy to fix that. We can grab this object here and duplicate it. We can call this cutter. So basically we'll be cutting through the noodles. So I will delete that top face because I want to cut out everything that is outside this volume. So everything outside this volume will be cut off. So I will close the face inside. Apply the rotation and scale, center the origin like I've been doing. And now let's apply a Boolean modifier. Set this to bounce. The way I'm doing that is select your object and go to viewport display. Set it to bound. I've just created like a shortcut for it. That's why I could access it easily. So now we've set it to bound. We want to select this instance spaghetti and go to modifier and add the Boolean modifier. So we'll be selecting this as a cutter. So we want to switch it from exact to fast. We can hide this for now. So we need to invert the cut. So we invert it to intersect, and you can see what we have now. And once you're happy, you can just apply it. and delete the scatter. Now at this stage you have the opportunity to go in and kind of adjust them, because this will not be really visible, but it helps if they look clean and organized, so that any other effect to be adding on top of this will be good. But before we continue, I want you guys to go ahead and give this video a like. If you've watched up to this extent, you must be enjoying it. It's a nice way to show that you're enjoying this video and kind of tell YouTube that it should recommend it to other Blender users, and I would really appreciate it if you do that. Also leave a comment to tell us about your favorite experience with eating spaghetti or something like that, or if you have another cool way of achieving this result with geometry node or in Blender, it would be welcome in the comments. So just, you can even say hi, hello in the comment, and I'll be well to reply you. Okay, so in this section we'll be learning about soft body, because that's what we're going to be using to simulate the noodles on top of everything. So if you've never used soft body before, this will be a good point for you to learn. Once you have your object which you want to simulate, and in this instance this noodles that we have combined, you want to go to soft body, and once you click on it and you go to your first frame, plate, you just see, you see it bouncing. It's bouncing because of the goal. So one of the most important section in the soft body is the goal parameter. So this allows you to control where it should simulate, what should not simulate. For this instance, we don't want the goal, because we just want gravity to do its work. We don't want to use any vertex group to restrict anything. So we'll turn off the goal. Some parameters that might interest you is like the object, mass and friction. If you increase the mass, it behaves like a heavier object and falls down faster. You have the friction, basically the way it interacts with collision objects and itself. So if we go ahead and play this, we can see the soft body just falls through the ball. So we need to create collisions. So we want this noodle object to be a collision object, so we can select it and click on collision, and we can also do the same thing for the ball. If we play it at a certain point, it seems like everything slows down. One way to optimize simulations when you encounter stuff like this is to duplicate the asset which you're working with and optimize that, create a proxy version of that asset. Go into the modifier and add a remesh modifier. So we can set this to like 0.05. Okay, and once you're done, you can apply it. Now this is what we'll use as the collision object. So let's delete that. So the new proxy mesh, which is going to be our collision object, I will set it to bounce and click on collision object. So if we play it now, we get a much faster result. So let's kind of speed things up. We need to optimize this. We don't want to kind of simulate it forever, since we'll be having lots and lots of more spaghetti here. So to speed it up, you can go to solver, uncheck auto step. It's basically going to speed it up. And we also want to switch this from 300 to like 50, so it's going to be faster. That's one way to speed up your soft body, though you lose some accuracy, but in this case we're fine with it. If you go closer, one thing you can notice is that it's not retaining its volume. It's kind of squishing, so we don't want that. We want it to retain its volume, at least for this. So to do that, we want to go to the edge and basically want to play with the plasticity and the bending. So we can increase the bending to 10 and the plasticity to 5. Okay, and we also want to check on stiffness. So if we play it, it kind of explodes. So the reason for the explosion is because we reduced the solver accuracy. So we could turn on auto step. It could help fix that. If not, we just need to increase the max value. So we're getting a much faster simulation, and it's working as expected. One thing you can notice is that it's bouncing around, so we don't want it to bounce around. We just want it to simulate and sit on the noodles. To do that, we just need to select the collision object and play with some of the collision settings. So here you have soft body and cloth. we want to increase the damping. So basically once it interacts, it kind of slows everything down, basically overriding the friction. For the outer thickness outer, basically giving some room of collision so it doesn't really have to go interact with the mesh itself. And for the friction, I will increase it to the highest value just so that it will not slide, it will just sit once it lands. So at this stage you can duplicate and place things around. So we'll just let this simulate so it just covers the entire bowl. So once you're done, depending on your PC, your processing power, it should determine the speed of it and of course the amount of object you're simulating. So I was able to simulate this with all the settings which I showed you. One thing I changed was I increased the mass of each of the object, and it's as easy as going to noodle, select object, hold on Alt and just play with this mass value. So once you're happy with this, selecting your object, you want to go to object, convert mesh. So it's going to apply the simulation and keep the pose as it is. So now you can delete things that you don't want or sculpt them to just adjust them to look good. I'm happy with how it's looking. It's a bit jagged. I'll be applying the subdivision and you will see the beauty now. Kind of smooths everything out and it starts to make sense. So because the time we have is running out, I've gone ahead to kind of shade and render this to the final image, but I will be going through the entire process of getting this to this particular look. You can see no texture was used, everything is just Blender default shading and the custom shading which I talked about. Okay, so this is where we left off. We ended up with our noodles that we created both from simulation and particles, and the next stage was setting up the camera and the render settings. So I had the 1080 squared for the resolution. For the sampling, I use full global illumination just to get more light in, because there are a lot of objects interacting with each other. It's going to cost more, but I have a pretty beefy computer, so it could handle it. You can always adjust this to fit your own settings. So I'm just using a max sample of 120, which will be adjusted when it comes time for final render. What else? I turned on transparency for composition, which I'll be showing you later. So that's just my render settings. So let's go over the material from the ground up. Okay, so I first added a simple surface scattered material just to give it that softer look, so that it feels very eatable. And I also created another subsurface. I like the result of this particular one, which is the random walk, but it was quite problematic in certain areas where it created a lot of black outline. And to kind of have best of both worlds, I also like the look of this, so I combined the both of them and set them to 0.5, 50% basically, so I can get the best of both worlds. And when I got this result, I was happy. And the next is I added an add shader, because I wanted it was looking a bit dark, as you can see here. So I added an add shader with a translucency, and using the same color. Translucency material tend to add more saturation to color, so to work with that, I added a hue saturation node to kind of reduce the saturation. For the colors, I basically got the colors from a reference image of a spaghetti, so I got it and then adjusted it to match what I was going for. And then this RGB is used to drive the radius, basically the skin, the inner color of the color that is being exposed when light passes through the subsurface material. So this results to this. It's a bit shining. Food tends to, in CG, if you want to make food look more realistic, you just make it brighter. You can achieve that with emission, or which is less costly, or you could use translucent if you can if you have budget for that. So I also added a transparent shader to increase the softness, because I want to make it as soft as possible. That's what makes it more edible. And finally, I added a simple glossy material. So if we go ahead and render this right now, I'll make sure I have everything turned off. So if we go ahead and render this right now, this is the result we'll get. It looks good, but it looks decent. It's a good starting point, but we want to be able to push this further. So to push it further, basically I wanted to make it feel like a cooked spaghetti, because this looks good, this can pass. It looks good, it looks decent, but it doesn't feel like a cooked food. It feels very detached and like single spaghetti. I know some people like their spaghetti not all mushed up, but for stuff like this you want to sell it as much as possible. So for that I added a new object. Basically this object is a duplicate of the noodles object. I basically duplicated it, and this is it. So this is the new object which I added. It's sharing the same material, so exactly the same material for the noodles, but the only difference is I added a remesh modifier. So if I remove the remesh modifier, I added a remesh modifier to kind of make it clustered, so they're kind of combined together, and I added a smooth to kind of smooth it out. Okay, so I'll just turn this off for the viewport performance. I mean, it's not too heavy on the PC, so it's fine. So once I added that, let's see the result which we get for this. So let's go to another render slot and render. So it's done rendering, and we can compare the two. So this is the first one we rendered, it looks pretty good, and this is the second one. It looks like it's smushed together like food, and increase the niceness. I think overall I like it better, though to kind of smooth this out, because this is a bit jagged, one thing we can do is I'll just turn unsimplified. So I will select this and add a subdivision before the remesh modifier, so it smooths that out. Okay, so let's render one more time. It kind of took away the magic of that softness, so I will probably add it back. And for stuff like this that stands out, this sharp edge, what I can do is go in and delete them, or probably just smooth them out. I just beveled it to kind of smooth it out, and we can get another problematic one, which is this object, and we can delete it. Okay, so that should fix that, and that's how I got the soft look. The next is to add like the sauce. So for the sauce, that's the reddish tint. I basically did the same thing, duplicated it and added a remesh modifier. And for the shading, it's exactly the same. What is different is the color I used, and also the intensity of this transparency. So if we see the noodles, it has a transparency of 0.4, and the sauce has a transparency of 0.3. It's a bit transparent, but not so much. And with the combination of that, this is what we get. Okay, so with the sauce added, we start getting this oriented, and I just added a plane for the leaves. Nothing special about it. I created a plane, added some subdivision, then I went to search and search for randomized transformation just to make it uneven, and placed it here with the snapping turned on, so it kind of snaps on top of the food. You could use particles to get this, but I'm kind of getting tired already. So I just use snap to kind of place it around. The color is quite straightforward, just a simple green, dark green, and with surf to give it that fleshy feeling. And if we render it, let's see what we get. Okay, so this is it. It's not perfect, like this is just a base level. You can always push this to new heights with textures, bump maps, and there's so much things you can do to improve this. So once you're done with all of this, like I said, the magic really comes out in composition. You're combining everything, playing with the color values and getting the different type of effects. And I'm going to be showing the setup. So for my setup for the compositing, I basically first of all, I enable transparency, which you can see here. That's why there's no background. Next, I went to the render pass, and enabled crypto matte and set it to objects, so I could just select different objects and play with their values. So once I did that, I had everything I need for composition. So I'll click on use node, and this is what we get. This is the default render. And next I will extract the crypto matte. I'm basically using this is the peak, and you just click on add and you pick a particular color. It's nice because you can see the name of the object associated with it. So with that, I kind of created a matte of this. Okay, so it's basically input of the render, and you just place it here, which is very convenient. So once you have that, I then use the alpha node to combine them. So I use the matte as a factor, use the image. You could even pass by using this image here. All you needed is just the factor from the matte. So that's what I did. And then I plug this. I'm kind of confused now. Okay, so this is used as a factor. Okay. So what I did to this object is I got the crypto matte. I used this color balance to mess with the color values. I made it brighter because by default it looks a bit darker. So I separated it and made it lighter to kind of differentiate the sauce from the noodles or spaghetti. Then I also made it softer, artificially softer with the shader, so that it just feels more like food. I reduced this, I made it softer, and then I combined the both of them. This is the default and this is the final. Okay, and then I added a multiply. This multiply is basically the ambient occlusion. You could do without this, but I wanted to make it a bit more grounded, so it feels like it's interacting with surrounding objects some more. Play with this value, and once I'm done, I connect it with the background. I'm just using a black image, and now I enhance the color. Just trying out different color tones. You can reduce this to make it brighter. You can, depending on what you want. And that's basically the setup. So this is the default render, and this is the final output. So this is how important adding a bit of composition to your image can improve it greatly. Another thing is the color management. I use the very high contrast. I don't know, it's just a preference. You might not like it, but I usually go for very high. I just like that contrast look. It connects with me. So once that's basically it, you can test it out, play with different lighting setup, and just have fun. So that'll be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a long one. I was thinking to be shorter, but like I said earlier, please leave a comment in this video. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know the best way you like you like to have your spaghetti. Also, just say hi in the comment section and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. So stay tuned. We'll see you by this time next week. Bye bye for now. See you next time.